Hi there. Welcome back to Haunting Vales. Tonight's mystery begins in a room where no one dared to touch. And yet, something moved on its own. The grand drawing room of the Vanderley estate seemed peaceful at first glance. Velvet curtains, polished furniture, a fire crackling softly. But then objects shifted, letters disappeared, and a glass tipped over without a hand to knock it down. The household was terrified. The police were puzzled. And Hercule Poirot sensed something far more deliberate than a mere trick of the wind. Because sometimes the hand you cannot see is the one that writes the deadliest story. Before we uncover who or what was controlling the unseen hand, don't forget to subscribe for more chilling Hercule Poirot mysteries. Chapter 1. When the unseen hand first moved. Rain pressed against the tall windows of Ashcroft Manor with slow, deliberate force, as if the night itself wished to enter the house. Wind dragged across the roof in low, mournful sweeps, and the sky beyond the glass remained starless, heavy, and sealed in darkness. Inside the drawing room, firelight trembled along the walls, stretching long shadows across velvet curtains, polished furniture, and the faces of those gathered in silence. 6 people occupied the room. No one spoke. No one moved. Yet tension filled the space thicker than smoke. Lady Eleanor Ashcroft sat closest to the fire, her back straight, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her silver hair was drawn tight, her face calm but carved with the weight of long years and private grief. The jewels at her throat caught the shifting light, glinting like watchful eyes. Across from her sat Victor Ashcroft, her stepson. His suit was flawless, his posture rigid, his jaw locked so tightly that the muscle pulsed at his cheek whenever he swallowed. His eyes kept returning to the tall grandfather clock in the corner, as if measuring each second against something unseen. Margaret Hale stood near the window, clutching a leather folder to her chest. Lady Eleanor's personal secretary had been summoned only hours earlier with urgent instructions that allowed no delay and no refusal. Now her face had drained of color, her eyes unsettled, as though she regretted answering that call. Dr. Thomas Reed occupied a seat near the far end of the room. His hands rested together on his knees, but his gaze shifted constantly, watching each face with the silent caution of a man trained to detect weakness. Beside him lounged Julian Crowe, a distant relative who had arrived several days earlier without invitation. His boots were polished, his expression smooth, his smile practiced. Yet nothing about his presence felt accidental. Standing apart from them all, near the edge of the firelight where shadow ruled, was Hercule Poirot. He did not sit. He did not rush. He observed. The grandfather clock struck 8. The sound landed heavy in the room. Lady Eleanor drew a slow breath. "You are all here because I was threatened." No one spoke. 3 days ago, a letter appeared on my breakfast tray, she continued. No signature, no address, only a single sentence. Her gaze lifted slowly, passing across each of them before settling briefly on Victor. It said that I would die in this house before the week was over. Margaret inhaled sharply. Dr. Reed shifted in his chair. Julian's smile thinned. Victor's lips parted as if to speak, then closed again. "You should have gone to the police," Victor said at last. Lady Eleanor's eyes hardened. "And told them what?" That death had scheduled an appointment. Poirot spoke softly from the shadows. "Threats seek attention, but they also seek fear. The true question is not whether the letter was meant to frighten you. The question is who benefits from your fear." Lady Eleanor studied him for a long moment. "That is why you are here, Mr. Poirot. Because tonight, something in this house feels wrong, as though something unseen is already moving." Silence followed her words and settled deep. The first sign came unnoticed. A faint stirring of air, so slight it might have been imagined. Margaret shivered suddenly and tightened her grip on the folder. A cold trail had brushed the back of her neck, light as passing breath. "Did you feel that?" she whispered. Dr. Reed frowned. "Feel what?" She shook her head. She could not explain it. Then the fire shifted. Not dimmed, not faded. It leaned, just slightly, as if something invisible had passed between flame and room. Poirot's gaze sharpened. The grandfather clock fell silent. The ticking stopped without warning. Every head turned. Time itself had hesitated. Lady Eleanor gasped. Blood bloomed between her fingers. She stared at her own hand in disbelief as a thin red line formed across the back of her palm. Dr. Reed moved instantly, guiding her hand upward, examining the wound. "A cut," he said. "Shallow, but fresh." Victor rose to his feet in shock. No one touched her. Poirot stepped forward. Correct. No one touched her, and yet she was wounded. Julian gave a quiet, uneasy laugh. A splinter, perhaps. Poirot's eyes never left the wound. Splinters do not choose their moment with such precision. Lady Eleanor's face had gone pale now, the strength draining from her eyes. "Something struck me," she whispered. "I felt it." She was escorted from the room at once, guided upstairs to her bedchamber under Dr. Reed's watch. Victor insisted on remaining beside her. The others were left behind in uneasy stillness. Minutes dragged like hours. Then hurried footsteps thundered from above. Victor burst back into the room, his face stripped of color. "She collapsed," he said. "Dr. Reed believes it is shock. But there is something else." Poirot stepped forward. "Speak." "The bedroom door was locked from the inside," Victor said, "and there is blood on the handle." The words struck the room like a blow. The bedchamber lay warm with lamplight when they arrived. Lady Eleanor rested motionless on the pillows. Dr. Reed stood over her in silent concern. The door had indeed been locked, and the inside handle bore a smear of fresh red. Poirot surveyed the room without touching a single object. The overturned chair near the wall, the slight disturbance in the curtain folds, the narrow arc of blood upon the pillow's edge. "This is not her blood," Poirot said quietly. Margaret trembled. "Then whose is it?" Poirot turned slowly and faced the others. "The blood of the one who passed unseen through a locked room." Victor took a step back. Julian folded his arms. Margaret's breath quickened. "But that is impossible," she said. No one entered. Poirot's voice lowered. "That belief is the very doorway the killer requires." The room fell into silence again. Somewhere within Ashcroft Manor, a presence had moved without being seen, and it was not finished. Chapter 2. The Unseen Hand Closes In. Ashcroft Manor did not sleep that night. The storm outside worsened as darkness thickened around the house, rain lashing the windows with relentless force, wind clawing at the stone walls as if something wished to tear its way inside. Lamps burned in corridors that were usually dark by midnight. Footsteps echoed softly across polished floors. Whispers lived in every corner. Lady Eleanor lay unconscious beneath the watch of Dr. Reed. Victor refused to leave the hallway outside her chamber. Margaret remained seated in the drawing room, her grip still tight around the folder she had brought with her. Julian drifted about the house with restless steps, too calm for a man surrounded by fear. And through it all, Poirot moved silently, as steady as a shadow that belonged to the house itself. An hour after the attack, Dr. Reed descended the stairs and joined the others. "Her pulse is steady now," he said, "but she must not be disturbed. Whatever caused the collapse was not physical. It was shock, pure and simple." Poirot studied him carefully. "And the blood on the handle?" Dr. Reed hesitated. "It was not hers." The words shifted the air between them. Victor stood from his post near the fireplace. "Then someone else is bleeding in this house." Poirot nodded. "Yes, and they did not come forward." Margaret found her voice at last. You think the person who wounded her also locked the room from the inside? I believe the person wished it to appear that no one had entered, Poirot replied. Julian leaned against the mantel with a faint smile. Quite the performance. But how does one attack another without being seen in a locked room? Poirot walked slowly along the edge of the carpet, by ensuring all eyes are elsewhere at the critical moment. Fear is a powerful curtain. It draws attention forward while danger moves behind. Margaret shivered. You mean the wound in the drawing room was meant as a distraction? Yes, Poirot said. The first move was a demonstration. The second was an intrusion. Victor stared at the stairway. Then the real attempt on her life happened upstairs. And it failed, Poirot said softly, which makes the next attempt more dangerous. Silence settled again, thicker now, weighted by expectation rather than shock. Poirot turned to Margaret. Your folder. You have not released it since you arrived. Margaret stiffened. It contains Lady Eleanor's private records. Financial matters. Wills. Property transfers. Julian's smile sharpened. That sounds very interesting. Margaret ignored him. She asked me to review several documents today. She believed they might be connected to the threat. Poirot extended his hand. May I see them? After a moment's hesitation, Margaret placed the folder in his grasp. Poirot opened it carefully and began to examine its contents beneath the lamp. Long pages filled with figures and notes passed beneath his gaze, his eyes moving more quickly than his hands. Poirot stopped at one page, then another, and he lifted his head. There has been a change to Lady Eleanor's will, he said quietly. Victor went rigid. What kind of change? 5 days ago, Poirot continued, the majority of her estate was reassigned. Margaret swallowed. To whom? Poirot did not answer immediately. His eyes lifted and settled on Julian. Julian chuckled softly. That is not a crime. No, Poirot said, but it can be a motive. Victor's voice hardened. You arrived here without notice. You were added to the will days later. And now my stepmother is attacked. Julian raised his hands calmly. You make it sound far more dramatic than it is. Poirot returned his attention to the page. There is more. A secondary inheritance clause was added at the same time. Margaret leaned forward. What does it say? It states that if Lady Eleanor were to die within 7 days of the change, the primary beneficiary would forfeit the estate entirely. Julian's smile vanished. And who receives the estate in that event? Victor demanded. Poirot closed the folder. You do, Victor. The room shifted. Julian laughed again, but it came sharp and forced. So the obvious murderer would now be the man who gains everything by my failure. Poirot regarded him calmly. Or the man who gains everything by your removal. Margaret pressed her hands to her temples. Someone planned this from the beginning. Yes, Poirot said, and planned it carefully. Julian pushed away from the mantel. If this is some elaborate trap to remove me, I want no part of it. Victor's eyes were cold. You will remain right where you are. Heavy steps sounded in the hallway above. Dr. Reed's voice echoed faintly from Lady Eleanor's chamber, calling for assistance. They raced upward. Lady Eleanor's room was in chaos. The curtains had been torn from the rod and lay sprawled across the floor. The lamp near the bedside had shattered. Glass glittered across the carpet like frozen rain. She woke in terror, Dr. Reed said. She swore someone stood at the foot of her bed. Victor clenched his fists. Did you see anyone? Dr. Reed shook his head. The door remained locked. Poirot moved slowly to the foot of the bed. He lowered his eyes. Then he knelt. A faint impression lay pressed into the carpet. A partial footprint, not deep, but unmistakable. The unseen hand leaves traces now, Poirot murmured. He rose and studied the room. His gaze lingered on the shattered lamp, on the severed curtain rope, on the scattered glass. Then he saw it, a shred of dark fabric trapped beneath the lower edge of the bed. Poirot drew it free with 2 fingers. Julian's face tightened the instant he saw it. That fabric matches your coat lining, Victor said harshly. Julian's voice rose. You cannot be serious. Poirot held the shred near the light. Wool blend, recently torn, and stained with blood. Margaret gasped. Julian stepped back slowly. You think I risked everything by staging a locked room attack? I think, Poirot said, that you believe you could create confusion strong enough to hide your movements. Victor lunged forward, but Poirot raised a hand. Not yet. This evidence is not complete. Julian exhaled slowly. Good, because I did not attack her. Poirot studied him long and hard. Perhaps, or perhaps you wish to fail. Julian stiffened. Why would anyone wish to fail a murder? To remove suspicion, Poirot said. A failed attempt appears clumsy, but a failed attempt can also disguise a more subtle plan. Margaret's voice shook. Then what is the real plan? Poirot turned toward Lady Eleanor, who lay quiet once more beneath the sheets. To control the timing of death. The words settled like frost. Victor whispered, You think this will happen again? Yes, Poirot said, but the next attempt will not be theatrical. The group returned to the drawing room beneath a weight of dread that clung to every step. The house felt narrower now, its halls closing inward, its windows like blind eyes. Poirot requested that everyone remain within sight of one another until morning. Hour after hour passed. Fire settled to embers. Wind cried against stone. No one slept. Near dawn, Margaret stirred suddenly and stood. I need water. Victor escorted her toward the side corridor. Moments later. A scream tore through the house. They ran. Margaret lay collapsed near the service stair, her folders scattered across the floor. A thin line of blood streaked her wrist. Victor dropped to his knees beside her. She was attacked. Poirot examined the scene. No, she was warned. Margaret's eyes fluttered open. Someone pushed me, she whispered. From behind. I saw nothing. Poirot scanned the narrow corridor. Only one truth remained. The unseen hand had struck again, and now it was drawing them closer to a final move. Chapter 3. The Unseen Hand Revealed. Dawn crept into Ashcroft Manor like a reluctant witness. Gray lights slid across stone walls and silent corridors, touching the edges of shattered glass, overturned furniture, and the pale faces of those who had not slept. The storm outside had passed, leaving the world damp and breathless, as if the night itself were holding its breath for what was yet to come. Margaret lay resting on the sofa in the drawing room, her wrist bandaged by Dr. Reed. Her face was drawn with fatigue and fear, but her eyes were alert now, tracking every movement around her. Victor stood near the fireplace, rigid with exhaustion and rage. Julian remained seated apart from the others, his arms folded, his confidence visibly eroded. And Poirot stood by the window, watching the weak morning light climb slowly across the garden beyond. The house no longer felt haunted by suggestion. It felt hunted by intention. The attack on Margaret was not meant to kill, Poirot said at last. It was placed to provoke a reaction. Victor turned sharply. A reaction from whom? Poirot's gaze shifted slowly. From the one who understands that the unseen hand can no longer remain unseen. Dr. Reed shifted his weight. You have said all along that the killer was among us. Now you sound as though there is more than one. There is only one who strikes, Poirot replied, but more than one who lies. Silence followed. Margaret pushed herself into a sitting position. You believe someone here helped the attacker? Poirot inclined his head. Knowingly or not. Julian let out a dry breath. That is convenient. Anyone can be accused of lying. Poirot turned toward him. Not anyone. Only those whose actions break the pattern of fear. Julian stiffened. What pattern? Poirot moved slowly through the center of the room. Fear makes humans cautious. It slows their steps. It sharpens their attention. Yet you moved with ease through each crisis. In the drawing room, in the hallway, in the bedchamber disturbance, in the corridor where Margaret fell. Victor rounded on him. You were in every place where chaos erupted. Julian's voice hardened. So were all of you. Yes, Poirot said quietly. But only you returned each time lighter than before. Margaret frowned. What do you mean? Poirot gestured toward Julian's coat draped over a chair. When you first arrived, your coat lining was intact. After Lady Eleanor's bedchamber disturbance, it was torn. After the second incident, the tear had vanished. Julian stared at the coat. Someone else had noticed as well. Dr. Reed spoke slowly. I stitched that lining for him during the night. He said it split earlier. Poirot's eyes never left Julian. You repaired evidence before it could be examined. Julian sprang to his feet. You twist every detail to fit your accusations. Poirot turned toward the stairway that led to Lady Eleanor's chamber. Then allow us to test one final truth. Victor followed his gaze. What truth? Poirot answered without turning. Whether Lady Eleanor yet lives. They rushed upstairs. The door to her chamber stood closed. Locked. Again. Dr. Reed stepped forward in alarm. She was stable when I left her. Victor forced the door open. The room was still. Too still. Lady Eleanor lay upon the bed exactly as before, but her skin had lost its warmth. Dr. Reed pressed trembling fingers to her neck, then slowly withdrew his hand. She is gone. Margaret is chiflada sobi. Victor staggered backward. Julian remained motionless. Poirot stepped into the room alone. No broken glass. No torn curtains. No violent struggle. Only a woman lying in peaceful stillness. Poison, Dr. Reed whispered. It must be poison. Poirot's gaze fell upon the bedside table. An empty glass. A faint bitter scent lingering in the air. Poison requires delivery, Poirot said. And delivery requires access. Victor turned sharply. You think one of us brought it to her? Poirot turned slowly back toward Julian. No, I believe someone ensured that she took it herself. The room fell into stunned quiet. Margaret whispered. You mean she ended her own life? No, Poirot said. I mean she was convinced that she had no other choice. All eyes fixed on him. Poirot spoke with measured certainty. Lady Eleanor was shown proof of something she believed would destroy everything she had built. Something she believed would ruin you, Victor. And something that would also save Julian. Julian's lips parted slightly. Victor's voice shook. What proof? Poirot gestured toward Margaret's folder, still resting downstairs. The will was only one part of the design. There was another set of documents hidden beneath those transfers. Margaret looked stricken. The letters. Poirot nodded. Letters written years ago that revealed a truth Lady Eleanor had buried. That Victor was not her stepson. Victor froze. Poirot continued. He was her biological son, born out of scandal and hidden beneath inheritance law. The letters were discovered recently. By you, Julian. Julian's breath came slow. You cannot prove that. Lady Eleanor believed it, Poirot said. And belief is more powerful than proof. She believed that if the truth became public, Victor's claim to the estate would collapse. She believed she would destroy the son she had hidden for decades. Victor's voice broke. Why would that save him? Poirot turned. Because the secondary inheritance clause would activate only if Julian were removed from suspicion. Her death by her own hand would place the fortune directly into Victor's control without contest. Margaret whispered in horror. She chose her own death to protect him. Poirot nodded once, but she was guided to that choice. Julian laughed softly. You accuse me of psychological murder now. You showed her the documents, Poirot said. You convinced her that Victor would be ruined. You convinced her that her only escape was silence. Victor's eyes burned. You used her love against her. Julian's smile flickered. She made her own decision. Poirot's voice hardened. You created the cage. She chose how to die within it. Dr. Reed lowered his head. Then all the attacks, the wounds, the terror. They were meant to make her believe death was already hunting her, Poirot said. That the unseen hand would never stop. Victor turned violently on Julian. You manipulated the fear. You staged the impossible so she would surrender. Julian's calm finally shattered. I did not touch her. No, Poirot said. You ensured she touched the poison herself. The room stood frozen in devastated understanding. Outside, the weak morning sun climbed higher. 2 uniformed officers arrived minutes later to take Julian into custody. He did not resist. His confidence was gone now, drained like blood from the floor of the night. As he was led away, his eyes met Victor's one last time. Victor did not look back. Hours later, the drawing room lay quiet once more. Lady Eleanor was gone. The unseen hand had revealed itself, and its weapon had never been steel. It had been fear. Victor stood beside the window, staring into the pale morning air. She died believing she was saving me. Poirot's voice softened. She died believing she was choosing your future over her own. Margaret pressed her hands together, and the blood on the handle. The murderer wounded himself in the first distraction, Poirot said, so the stain would later belong to someone else. He wanted to hide his true weapon behind impossible movement. Dr. Reed nodded slowly. The unseen hand was never invisible. It was ignored. Silence returned to Ashcroft Manor at last. But it was no longer waiting. It was finished. If you want more powerful mysteries like this, full of mind games, hidden motives, and unforgettable twists, make sure you subscribe now. Turn on notifications, and stay with this channel for the next dark case that only the sharpest mind can solve.